I want to show you something that nobody tells you about winning a gold medal. I was 28 years old. I just won my second X Games gold medal back to back. And I was on the cover of magazines. I was traveling all over the world. It was a dream come true. Brands were paying me over 500 grand a year to ride a snowboard. And I was completely dependent on my one income. And I realized that was super risky. I didn't spend it on Lamborghinis or anything like that. I'm talking about I earned 500 grand and the government took around 40% of it before I ever saw it. Today, I'm going to tell you guys exactly how I went from a gold medal and a relatively empty bank account to managing over 430 million in real estate. People see X Games gold medals and they just assume, I was swimming in cash. And the reality is that professional snowboarding, it's not the NFL or the NBA. Even the top guys, they max out at $1 million or maybe $1.5 million a year. That's the ceiling in snowboarding. And as a self-employed athlete with no team or corporate structure, I was classified as a sole proprietor. I was in the S quadrant, and my income tax plus my self-employment tax, it equaled roughly 50% of what I was making. It was gone before I ever could even touch a dollar. So you take the math, if I had 700 of income, 350 after taxes, I got rent, travel, gear, training, living expenses, almost nothing is left, and zero assets generating income during my snowboarding career. And as a snowboarder's career ends, between 30 and 35, I was already in my late 20s. I could see the finish line coming, and there was nothing on the other side. The thing that strikes me the most painful is I went through 10 years of struggle to become a professional snowboarder. I was eating peanut butter and jelly for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? I was working at Blockbuster, living paycheck to paycheck, and all of a sudden my snowboarding career takes off. And it's a dream come true, and I signed a lot of contracts with a lot of brands, and my income skyrockets from where I was. And all of a sudden at the end of the year, my CPA, who's been telling me to put money in IRAs and invested in these slow moving vehicles with no tax efficiencies, they say, yeah, hey, Dan, you owe 40% of what you made for taxes. I hope you've been setting that aside. And I remember I almost got punched in the gut. I asked, I'm like, how's that possible? I just spent the last 10 years sacrificing and finally I make it. And you're asking me for 40% of my income. And they said, that's how it works. Welcome to being a grown up. Welcome to the real world. That's really almost exactly what they said to me. And, for me, I just don't buy that. I know enough to be around enough other wealthy people. That is not true for everybody. Not everybody's playing the same arena. Not everyone's earning income in the same quadrant. And for me, I realized I needed to get educated because what are these other people doing? I know they're doing something different than me. I know they're behaving in different ways than me. I know they're earning income in different ways. What are they doing in order to see or receive some tax shelter, and how can I do what they're doing? And that's really how the course went of me learning and transferring and transitioning into real estate. I look at a lot of people that are earning capital, right? They're in their work dream job, right? W-2 income, zero deductions. And the question I always ask myself during my snowboarding career is, how safe is this? How secure is this income? And how long is it going to last realistically? And when it does end, what am I going to do to transition? And so if you're listening to this and you or have good income and you got a lot of tax paying, the thing I'd be looking at is, what do I want my future to look like financially, right? And so for me, I was really clear that I wanted to create multiple streams of income in addition to my snowboarding income. And so I remember riding the chairlift, I'm riding up at Mount Hood, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I won't say that my snowboarding career was a waste of time, but it did feel more like a waste of time, in the sense that I only got paid when I worked. If I wanted to get paid, I had to work. And the realization, the light bulb moment for me is I want to get paid whether I work or don't work. That's freedom for me. And so really, I think the biggest thing that comes back to for me when I was, self-employed in my snowboarding career is how much freedom did I really have? What was the likelihood that when my career ended abruptly, like I saw so many of my, friends, athletes, careers end quickly, what are the chances I can maintain the lifestyle I currently have? I don't have a big college career to back up to, and I actually wouldn't want that because I'm back in the E quadrant. So the question is where do you want to be in a decade? That's a really great goal. Think long term. I was what changed my life. I said in a decade, I'm really clear what my passive income goal, what I want it to be. And every year I continue to work on building that passive income number, because for me, I equate passive income to freedom. And at the end of the day, that's really what I'm looking for with finances, is financial freedom, to be able to do what I want to do when I want to do it, and to be moving efficiently with my tax pain that I was experiencing as a snowboarder. And look, I know a lot of you are watching this at different stages. And for those of you that are just learning, that's great. Keep watching, grab the free blueprint, educate yourself. But some of you are past that. You already know this makes sense conceptually. You just need someone to look at your specific numbers and tell you what actually applies. That's what our capital positioning call is for. If you're an accredited investor and you want to have a conversation with my team about how your capital is positioned and what real estate could look like in your portfolio, we've got a few spots open this quarter. Links down below. Another light bulb moment was reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You know, the thing I love about Robert Kiyosaki, I can relate to him. He wasn't an A student, right? He did decent in school. Same for me. And he explained things in simple terms, things that I could grasp and understand. I could read his book and I grasp every concept and I could see the picture in my mind's eye of what I needed to go do. And so as I'm reading Cash Flow Quadrant, right, learning about E quadrant, S quadrant, I, B, I'm seeing what quadrant I'm in, how I'm earning my income. And I can see why my tax bill now is so heavy. And I can see if I can adjust the quadrant, I can now start to have a different level of tax based off of the tax law, right? And I'm not over here studying the tax law, reading thousands of pages there. I use my CPA who's educated, who's obsessively looking at the tax law to help guide me and continue to educate me. But for me, with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it was a very clear moment of I'm in the S quadrant with one stream of income as an athlete, and it's very risky and very heavily taxed. That's the facts. And the reality is I wanted to be in a place where I had money flowing in no matter what, that was not taxed heavily. And so the data, going back to it, take my emotion out of how upset I was to learn what quadrant I was in as an athlete, go back to the data told me, hey, this is what I need to go do. This is how I need to behave. This is how I need to earn my income. And so once I could see that, it was really that light bulb moment of start. Just take steps today. Focus 1 year at a time. I set this 10-year target, and each year I set really clear goals and I committed to those goals. The same way my snowboarding career really took off, right? I mean, as a kid, I had this goal to be a professional snowboarder. I didn't really know what it was going to take. I didn't know what I needed to go do. I just started with what I could see, and I had a big goal of becoming a professional athlete. And then each year you set really clear goals, you commit to those goals, and before you know it, a decade passes like that, and all of a sudden you're traveling around as a professional snowboarder. Same with being a real estate investor, same with investments. Set a 10-year target. Commit to those 10-year targets in 1-year increments. Call them milestones and commit to those and continue to learn. Doesn't mean you don't course correct, right? I mean, I'm course correcting all the time. Our company is course correcting all the time. As we learn more information, we take in new data, course correct, keep going, course correct, keep going. And that's what Rich Dad, Poor Dad did for me. It just really clearly laid out a roadmap of what to go do, what to follow. It didn't happen overnight. Nothing great does. But over 5, 7, 10, 15 years, you're in a totally different spot. Guaranteed. During my snowboarding career, when I started to make, mid 6-figure income, and my buddies who were all at that same level or even higher, we all spent our money very differently. And it was funny to watch some of the guys that would go out and buy big homes, buy super nice cars. And I could just see how excited they were about those purchases. And the thing I always thought was I always was asking them was, hey, what are you putting your money into to invest? And the interesting part was they would do it later. I'll do that next year. I'll start that in the future. Well, the future never came for these guys. They kept doing what they were doing because pretty soon that car was a year old and now they needed to show up in the next new car. Pretty soon the house was normal and I needed a bigger house. And so that habit of purchasing liabilities instead of the habit of delaying gratification, right? Either you got the habit of spending or the habit of saving. That's what I noticed is the difference. And so they're looking at me and I live on 60 grand a year. Like I didn't really change anything, making what 500-600 grand a year. And I'm living on 60. And, now I look at where they are for the guys that had a spending habit. And they're back to square one. Like they're back doing what they were doing before they were a snowboarder, a lot of these guys. And that's not everybody. Some were smart, but the majority of them lived like it was never going to end. And so, the thing I think is important to think about personally when you're listening to this is, do you have a spending habit of enjoying, and does your brain froth over the spending on liabilities, or do you have a saving habit of where you get excited to save money? And I'm not talking saving money as the end game. I'm talking save, keep your emergency funds for sure, but save to invest. Get your emergency bucket, put away your cash. You got to have some cash. You got to be able to sleep at night. But beyond that, compound that cash to get investing, to get capital coming back to you, to create multiple streams of income. And the ability to delay that gratification, just hear that for a second, you guys, for 5, 7, or 10 years can change your life forever. And so I think about that. It's like, hey, I want to have the fun now when I'm 22 until I'm 30. And then I got to start over and literally be a rat race or addicted to my paycheck the rest of my life. Or I can create a new habit or start a new path and invest for those next 8 years and be financially free the rest of my life. It was just a no-brainer. And so, that's the thing I see with people who are making good money is, do you have the spending habit or the saving habit? And then are you wise with what you do save to invest to create more income for you? Between 33 and 34 years old, I was facing the end of my snowboarding career, you guys. And during that stage, it was scary. My identity since I was 12 years old was I'm a professional snowboarder. And losing that identity was terrifying. By the way, if this is clicking for you and you want the full picture of how this works from a tax perspective, I have a free blueprint that lays the whole thing out, just the framework. Links below, it's free. One of the scariest moments in my life, looking back, you guys, it wasn't the risks I took on my snowboard. We jumped buildings. There's actually a spot called the Gap of Death that Snowboarder magazine put out, jumping from building to building. It wasn't those moments that were the scariest. It was these moments that would be trickling in that I could see coming of my snowboarding career is going to end. And for me, it was, if I'm not a snowboarder, who am I? And that identity crisis is real. It's real for so many athletes. And a lot of athletes, they just never recover from it. And because of my interest in investing in capital, I was really lucky to be able to transition to this next career as a real estate investor. Had I not spent so much time and so much energy getting ready to transition, starting a company, investing time and energy into it, I really don't know where I would be right now in my life, because it's just such an obsessive period of your life. Everything you do, everything you think about, if you're actually a professional athlete and you've been obsessed with it for 20 years, like all these guys, like gals are that I know, when that change comes, it's terrifying. And it's hard to relate to it potentially if you've never been an athlete. But if you're listening to this and you're thinking, man, I've been in a career for a very long time, or I can see retirement coming, or a change that you want to see coming, the thing I would say to you guys is start early. Start educating yourself. Don't make this quick, sudden shift. For me, I luckily had 5 years during my snowboarding career as it wound down, as I was quietly building my company, quietly building my investments. And luckily during that 5-year period, when the shift came, when the cut came, when I got fired, and I did get fired, when that happened, it was more of a few tears. I'm not going to lie, there were some tears, but it was okay. That phase is gone. Let's focus on this next phase and let's go like hell. I think for athletes out there, the advantage you get when you transfer is what it's like to commit, right? Commitment moves the world. And to really show up in a committed way, when you do that, it's felt. You can tell when someone's serious. At least I can. When I talk to a business owner that's really committed to their company, it's, we're going to make this no matter what. That mentality is different than, we're here, we're going to do our best, and if things don't work, we're just going to start something else. It's very, very different. And I also think risk management played a huge role from snowboarding, because we're hitting jumps, we're hitting features where you could die. Like, reality is you come up short on a building gap, you're probably dead. That's just the way it is. In backcountry, you likely had broken bones. And so a big part of what we had to do in our snowboarding career was assess risk constantly. Be aware of the downsides, protect the downsides. And if you didn't do that well, your season ended early. You didn't have a snowboarding career. That's not something just I did. All of us as athletes were doing that. We're out filming. We're all working together. That's the other piece too when it comes to real estate. Like, we're all assessing risk together. This isn't just Dan assessing risk, deciding on buying a 300 unit apartment for $50 million. This is Dan and 10 team members and my co-founder, Granite Towers, digging in deep with a bunch of other people who are putting capital at risk, all looking to figure out what red flags we need to be prepared for. And in snowboarding, it was the same way. We'd show up to a spot, backcountry spot. We got 3 athletes, 2 filmers and a photographer. Everyone is committed to saying, hey, how do we show up and get an incredible shot? And everyone goes home healthy. And so I think those are some of the things that really come to my mind. Risk management is huge. Commitment is huge. Just discipline. Just showing up in a disciplined manner and just knowing that as good as you think you are, you always could do it better. I think about my snowboarding career when I was winning gold medals in X Games. I won 2 back-to-back X Games gold medals. And I was considered one of the top guys in the world in urban snowboarding. And I can still remember during those years, there was always a next level. There was always the next thing. There was always we could do this a little better. And that's how I think business ownership is when it comes to real estate too. As good as you are, as great as you become, there's always ways to improve. And that's one of our core values, constant never ending improvement. Yeah, if you're making really good money and you have zero assets, what I would do tomorrow morning is I'd sit down and take a look at your spending habits. You've got to create a delta between what you're making and what you're spending. And that can be uncomfortable. That can be hard. I'm not saying change your life and say, okay, I'm going to sell my Ferrari. I'm going to downgrade my house tomorrow. Okay, I'm not saying that. I am saying, can you eliminate something to start to put a good chunk of capital away every year? Something you can say, okay, I'm going to let go of this good right now so I can have great later. And just have a real honest conversation with yourself, with your wife, with your spouse, whoever it may be, about your financial goals. Because becoming wealthy is more of a mindset. It's not necessarily you got to do this, 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 and this. It's how you see wealth. It's how you see money. It's the decisions you make every single day. And so that's what I would do first, is have a really good hard look at what's my income, what's my expenses, can I create a delta to start getting 50, 75, 100, 200 grand a year set aside. Now, as I'm starting to stack that capital and I'm clear and I got the initial part laid out, now I start to educate myself on where to put the capital. Now I start to look for operators. Now I start to build relationships with people like us, build relationships with other operators, other asset classes you're interested in. And as you become more educated, now you've got two things happening. You're stacking capital, your lifestyle shifted a touch, you're educating yourself. Now you start putting your capital to work. You're deploying capital. Think about the power in that. As you start to put your money you've made and saved to work, now that chunk of capital is working for you. You're not working for the money. Your money is working for you. You need to get as much capital as you can paying you every month. And once you have enough capital working for you, now you're living off passive income. Now you're free. Winning X Games gold medals was one of the greatest feelings of my life. And knowing that those years of grinding have finally paid off, that's a big deal for me. But the gold medal, it did not pay my mortgage, you guys. The magazine covers, they didn't build my net worth. And the sponsorship checks, they all had an expiration date that was coming whether I was ready or not. What actually built my wealth was the boring stuff nobody saw. The duplex I bought when everyone else was buying trucks. You don't need a gold medal to build wealth. You just need to stop treating your income like it's going to last forever, because it will not. Start building something that pays you whether you show up or not, and I'll see you on the next one.